Hello, everybody, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Bharadwaj, and today we're going to discuss about Venezuela. We are all aware of what has happened on the 3rd of January, where overwhelming US military power was showcased, and the whole world was shaken by the events of Venezuela as the president of Venezuela, Mr. Maduro, along with his wife, was captured and brought to the United States of America. But the whole world is actually discussing about it, and we need to really have a perspective. We need to really understand the entire problem. And in order to understand this, let's take this opportunity to also look at it from a historical perspective. Venezuela is a country that received its sovereign independence, complete sovereignty, in the year 1830. Their war of independence was successful in the year 1821 itself, after which they became a part of the Gran Colombia. Thereafter, after secession from the Gran Colombia in the year 1830, they received complete independence or complete sovereignty, you can say. Now, what happened after that was cut to the year 1905. What happened in the year 1905 was they found oil in Venezuela. It is a very well known fact today that the Venezuelan oil, the crude of Venezuela, is actually a very hard crude, and it needs special treatment. It needs special refineries to refine it. The same oil that was there found in 1905 was actually used in both the world wars. This oil was used by the Allied powers, and by the year of 1945, when the Second World War came to an end, Venezuela found itself to be the fourth largest leading economy. But the twist in the story comes right after this. In the 1970s, what actually happens is that a leader named Chavez, President Chavez, comes to power, and President Chavez is a person who has the guiding principle of socialism in his life. And he actually goes about nationalizing all the assets of this country, especially the oil assets. The country was essentially running on oil. That was the lucrative sector of the oil. At the same time, when oil was actually running as a lucrative sector in the country, other sectors weren't doing as good as this particular sector. Oil was brought under the public domain, it was brought under the public sector. So, what happens when things come under public sector is you have government officials actually running the entire show. You might have subject area specialists, but you have the government officials having a final say who might not actually be experts on the subject. They're there by the virtue of their position in the government. This led to the slow and steady decline of the oil sector of Venezuela, a sector that was producing 3.5 million barrels a day came down to 0.9 million barrels a day, that is 900,000 barrels a day. By the year 2013 and by the year 2025, it was even lesser. So, what happens here is you bring the oil sector into the public domain, and then there is a slow decay. Around the same time, you also have the United States making moves under the Obama administration. In the year 2014, 2015, the initial sanctions were put in place. But the journey of sanctions aggressively started in the year 2016-17 by the Trump administration, essentially 17-18 also, when PDVSA, the oil company of Venezuela, was actually sanctioned by him. What happens when you sanction? You've got to give reasons to the world that you have put sanctions on the country. Lawlessness, extrajudicial killings, rigging in the elections, repression of the opposition leaders, troubles with Guyana, and things like that were put on record, saying that this particular country is causing troubles to its own people, and the embezzlement of funds is happening through the public sector, publicly owned companies of oil. PDVSA was sanctioned under Trump administration 1. Surprisingly, those sanctions were actually carried forward by the Biden administration. However, there was an agreement of the Barbadosa where you have some relaxations being given on the agreement that there is going to be a lawful behavior in the country, lawful administration in the country, and no repression of the opposition leaders. But again, in the year 2024, when the Maduro administration overruled the objectives of that particular agreement and went ahead with their full power, those were again repealed and the sanctions were put intact right in place, essentially blocking oil. So what happens is when you put sanctions on particular commodity, especially oil as a commodity, crude oil, which is purchased in dollars. So no country in the entire world can actually go and purchase oil from Venezuela. And the entire oil of that country, 303.17 billion barrels of oil, is right there. It's not going to be extracted, it's not going to be sold. Right now, things are under the control of the United States of America. So what the United States and their president, the honorable president of the United States, has actually stated that the country is going to be run by them right now for a foreseeable future, unless and until there is a legitimate government elected and placed. The interim president or the acting president is the former vice president of Venezuela, and they're calling shots. They're calling the shots. They're running the show over there. But what is actually the problem in this particular act, in this entire journey? What has happened is Maduro was a president of a sovereign nation. He was captured by overwhelming military power of a foreign nation, foreign military on the soil. Declaration of war in a way, definitely yes. Within 30 minutes, you go capture the president, bring him back. What is the impact of this? Of course, there was resentment among the people of Venezuela. Largely, there was a resentment. People were not very happy. But still, you'll have loyalists in the country. You'll have warlords in the country. You'll have armed militias in the country. And the fear is lurking out in the dark is that what if there's a situation like Iraq? What if there's a situation like Libya? A lawless land would be a problem for the entire Latin American group of nations. The entire South American continent might actually be troubled by this tussle of power. What is actually again coming up again in the discussions in intelligent forums is that the Monroe Doctrine. President Monroe in the year 1823, 1825 actually gave this doctrine that uh, in in the Western Hemisphere there mustn't be any indulgence from the countries in the Eastern Hemisphere, essentially the European powers. Now, 19th century was a time when colonial power was on the rise. Everybody was just showing their muscle power. Everybody wanted to have their control on the resources of the world. So you had Europeans meddling in the affairs of other countries again and again. Monroe Doctrine particularly categorically says that the countries not belonging to this particular hemisphere, that is the Western Hemisphere, mustn't get involved in the affairs. What he conveyed very straightforwardly was that America North, in the northern continent, North America, and the South America are going to be the spheres of influence of the United States of America. What happened in the backyard of America very recently is that China was involved in the country with an investment of 100 billion US dollars. Now, the 100 billion US dollars invested right in the backyard of the United States of America with a president who's very aggressive, very unpredictable, and you really don't know to what extent he's going to go. Number one. Number two, Maduro was in talks with Iran repeatedly. Maduro purchased Russian military equipment. Yes, Venezuela was protected by Russian military equipment. S-300 missile systems were actually in place in Venezuela. Sukhoi 30 flights for the Venezuelan Air Force. All of this was there. Of course, the United States operation that was carried out very structurally and in a phase-wise manner attacked the radar system, the defense posts, the airstrips, and things like that, so that the Russian equipment or the Venezuelan Air Force or the army doesn't have anything to locate the flights that were coming inside the country. So there could be no response from the military. Moreover, in the regime of Maduro, there was resentment not just in the people of the country, but also appears that it was there in the people working alongside him. Certain reports are saying that officials of the Maduro regime were bribed, and thereafter they obtained the secret information, the discreet information that was supposed to be kept a secret was given to the Americans, and they had this information all put together, including the presidential palace. All of that was brought together and a final operation was executed. So, what do we really understand by this? What are going to be the takeaways for us as Indians? It's important that we have to learn something. We have to grow our own systems at some point. We can't really keep relying on the systems of the other countries. And we have to have our own threat analysis, and we have to keep top notch things available for our own self. Moreover, as a sovereign nation, we can't let ourselves be completely engulfed by the campaigns happening anywhere in the country and not entirely rely on a lot of social media campaigns or the information that goes around. We really need to have our own independent thoughts. When I say that we really need to have our own independent thoughts, my dear friends, do give your comments on what you think actually happened in Venezuela. The oil of Venezuela is now going to be controlled by the United States of America. Tankers surrounding the Venezuelan waters were actually traced by American Coast Guard and captured. Two or maybe more than that happens to be Russian tankers. Two of those have been Russian, but you really don't know. And gold, silver, essentially, the resources of Venezuela are in direct contact or in direct control of the United States of America. With this, I'll just stop the video here and thank you for watching.